Okay, welcome everyone. So we will start with our reading, and Liz is going to give the Emmett Fox reading.
March 20th. Truth demonstrated. Truth never changes, but what we have to deal with on this plane is man's apprehension of the truth. And throughout historical time, this has been steadily and continuously becoming more plain to us. Jesus Christ summed up this truth, taught it completely and thoroughly, and above all demonstrated it in his own person. Most of us now can glimpse intellectually the idea of what it must mean in its fullness. To accept the truth is the great first step, but not until we have proved it in doing it is ours. Jesus proved everything that he taught, even to the overcoming of death in what we call the resurrection. By surmounting every sort of limitation to which mankind is subject, he performed a work of unique and incalculable value to the race, and is therefore justly entitled the Savior of the world. When he, the Spirit of truth, is come, he will guide you into all truth. John 6:13.
All right, Lori, if you want to go ahead with your talk.
That was beautiful. I'm really glad to have heard that, because it spoke to me it spoke about Jesus as one of those great embodiments of the divine, bringing the divine into the present moment. And that's basically what I want to talk about. The feminine face of God. Jesus was very balanced. He had the masculine and feminine very balanced. He had the desire to move forward, to make things better, and he also had the community and the care and the compassion. It was in a beautiful balance. And when he showed up on the scene, it was this huge message of, guess what? You are the divine. And yet what happened over the millennia is an imbalanced interpretation of this, because he demonstrated and he talked about it through story, but he didn't get specific for a reason. He wanted to demonstrate, he wanted to show, he wanted to live it, he wanted to be, I'm guessing, I did not meet him in those times that I'm aware of, but he wanted to be that example of what we all want to be, which is balanced and aligned with divine energy and useful and loving and caring and all of those things that he showed. What ended up happening over the millennia was an imbalance, where we have really embraced the masculine and we have taken the feminine so far out of the equation that even we women have become so imbalanced. We've become much more aligned with the masculine. We are much more comfortable with doing, trying, which are important things to be able to do. We need to have goals. We need to be able to move forward. We need to be able to plan. These are masculine things that are critical. But the problem is we've lost our ability to learn that we need to let in the magic. We need to let in the allowing. We need to do things in a feminine way. And in fact, when I started looking at this a number of years ago, I thought, wait a minute, what does it mean? What does feminine even mean? Like, other than the sort of social things that we are taught, like you're supposed to be pretty enough, sexy enough, young enough, thin enough, but all of those things that we're supposed to sort of be to fit in, what does it really mean? And there were a couple of years there where I was like, I really don't have a clue. And that's very interesting. Does it just mean things like being surrendered? Does it just mean things like being a servant of God, a servant of people? Does it mean something more than that that I just can't find? Well, as I was preparing this talk, I came across a book that I actually bought in the mid-90s. It was written in 91 by two women. It's called The Feminine Face of God. These two women came together and they said, you know what? We need to figure out what it means to embrace the divine as women, because it's a different experience. It's a different thing than all of the male leaders have taught us. And if you look at all of the leaders that we have throughout any kind of growth place, whether it is the spiritual, the religious, the financial, the personal growth, you're going to find men coming out of the woodwork telling us how to do things. It's not that they're wrong about how to do some things, but it's from a very narrowed perspective of we have to get from here to here. There's a goal. We start here. We do this, we do this, we do this, and we get to the goal. And that's what we've all learned to do in school, in our lives. We see things that way, as beginning, middle, end. And if I get to the end, I have succeeded. Where in fact, the feminine is all about the process. The feminine is all about community, communication, the process of being alive. And when we don't have that, we get very, very lost. The men get lost as well, because we are all made up of that balanced masculine, feminine. And so men too are losing out from not having that balanced way of looking at things. Women are doubly missing out because it is who we are, and we have bifurcated a part of ourselves away because that's what we've been taught, not because we're, you know, stupid or something. It's just, it's the environment we've grown up in, and we've had to adapt, and we haven't thought about it. It's not been important. These days, it is now extremely important that we find that balance. Because if you have either side out of balance, we're in trouble. And we are in trouble right now from the unbalanced masculine, which is achieve, 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 win, 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 gain, gain, gain. If you have the other side, which is, you know, serve, 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 surrender, 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 and you never move forward, that's equally troubling. We need each other. The masculine and the feminine, we need each other. So I found this book that I had purchased, and I was like, oh dear Lord, this is the best book on earth. These two women came together, and they started to interview other women. They started to interview them about what has the feminine aspect of spirituality. What has your spirituality looked like when you've been in the middle of a divorce, when you've been in the middle of the death of a child, when you've been in the middle of losing your job? How have you brought that divinity into your life in a real way? What has that looked like? Boots on the ground. So what happened was, one of these women, she started hearing a word in her voice, in her head, Shekinah, Shekinah, Shekinah. And she was like, what is that? She couldn't figure out what the heck is Shekinah. And she felt like a tug inside herself when she heard it. Shekinah, what is that? She said, it sounds Hebrew, but I don't know of any Hebrew words that mean like that I can think of. She went to her husband, she went to her friends, she went to the local library. What is Shekinah? And it started to become more insistent in her mind. So she's still puzzling over what it could mean. She's sitting in her room one day, and her friend from next door comes running in and goes, let's try this, and puts a Kabbalah in her hands, which is also a Jewish tome of more mystical means than the Torah, which is a very written, sort of more traditional, wise tome. So she went through, and she went A, B, C, D, E, O, S, Shekinah, the feminine face of God. And this thrill went through her body because she realized that a few weeks previously, she had had a huge dream in which she'd actually been initiated. And let me read a little bit of this to you because it's so fascinating. And what I want to offer it to you for is for us to think about 3 different ways in which we can bring the feminine face of God into our own daily experience. Men, women, dogs, children, whoever you are, we can bring it in. And I'll tell you what those 3 things are after I read you the part of this story. So she's riding on a golden dragon, and while she's riding gloriously above the world on this golden dragon, she says, "Is this all there is?" And the golden dragon immediately descends to earth, comes to ground. And she sees an amazing temple by a big body of water, but she's afraid to go in alone. And she's hoping the dragon will come in with her, but the dragon's too big, it can't make it in. It's a person-sized temple. So she walks up to it and she sees that there is, let me see, what does she call it? A ferocious temple guardian with bulging eyes looming menacingly in the doorway, with 2 big snarling black dogs on either side of it. And with uncharacteristic, she says, courage, she walks straight up to them and they dissolve as if they're fog. So facing our fear. Once she's inside the doorway, she sees an old man with long robes and a white beard, and he emerges from an inner hallway, and without even talking, he says his name is Melchizedek. He's wearing a beautiful, handsome dagger with a handle of turquoise and jade, and as soon as she sees it, he hands her one for herself. And then he motions her ahead of him, expecting her to lead the way. So she walks into a long hallway with a very high ceiling and red tiles on the floor. And at the end of a long corridor, which they slowly walk down, is a pair of polished wooden doors. She pushes them open silently, and they are in a large empty room. A plain wooden stage is set against the far wall. At the back of the stage is a built-in cabinet, which she approaches, and she pulls open the door. And she's absolutely dumbfounded by what she sees. What she sees is the Torah rolled onto a finely carved set of wooden poles. Now, she learned as a child that the Torah contains the 5 books of Moses written on parchment by an Orthodox scribe, and that if even one letter's been written incorrectly, the Torah cannot be used. And she'd never seen a Torah up close because when she grew up, which is also when I grew up, only men were permitted that honor to see the Torah. But then she noticed something unusual about the Torah. First of all, she could take it out. She lifts it carefully. She holds it to herself like it's a baby. Sacred, beautiful, loved. And then she notices that instead of the normal encasing, which is velvet or a simple ribbon, it's been sealed shut by a dark round blot of red wax. And she looks at Melchizedek, who says, "This is a very special Torah." He pulls out his dagger, he breaks the seal, and he rolls open the scrolls. And they're absolutely blank. The Torah is empty, he says, because what you need to know now is not written in any book. You already contain that knowledge. It is to be unfolded from within you. "What is this Torah for?" she asks. And her question seems to set in motion the next sequence of events. Without speaking a word, Melchizedek lifts the Torah and lightly places it inside her body from her shoulders to her knees, and she accepts it gratefully, feeling her body as a sacred vessel. And at that, a huge commotion of joy and celebration breaks out behind her. The room is now filled with long-bearded patriarchs wearing black coats and trousers. They're laughing, they're holding hands, they're singing, they're dancing jubilantly, and they pull her into the celebration. As she's dancing, she seems to see Moses, King David, King Solomon, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Everybody is just whirling around and around, so happy. Finally, the dancing stops and she says, "What is this all about?" And Melchizedek says, "We're celebrating because you, a woman, have consented to accept full spiritual responsibility in your life. This is your initiation as one who will serve this planet. As she wonders what this means, he goes, and you're not the only one. Many, many women are coming forward now to lead the way. But who will be our teachers? She asks him. And he says, you will be teachers for each other. You will come together in circles and speak your truth to each other. The time has come for women to accept their spiritual responsibility for our planet. Will you help us? I asked the assembled patriarchs. We are your brothers, they answer. And with that, the entire room is flooded with an energy of indescribable kindness. I'm absolutely confident, she says, in this moment that they are our brothers. I feel their love without any question. They say then, we have initiated you and we give you our wholehearted blessings, but we no longer know the way. Our ways do not work anymore. You women must find a new way. Now, that's probably something that would create a great deal of panic. And that was back in 1991 that book came out. This idea that the feminine must come forward is actually a very threatening thing, which I know from my own life, where I've gone into businesses to be a secretary, and the people at the top are threatened by me because I, like them, am committed to creating something bigger, and they're not really with me in wanting to include anybody because it is a me versus you thing, where for women, it's an us thing. For the feminine, it's an us thing. It's not that men as a whole don't have this, but all of us in this culture, we've become trapped in the unbalanced. So I was looking through the book to find some examples that they had from actually speaking with people to illustrate how the feminine can be used in our daily life, whether we're women or men. And what I came up with was 3 things. The first one is sharing and the power of story. I don't know about you, but I've heard over and over again in many different contexts, oh, that's just your story. Like, that's just your story. Like, get away from the story and find your own way and be yourself and find your real. Well, the feminine lives in story. That is where we live. That is where, when we share our story with one another, we learn who we are. We get it reflected back and we feel a sense of identity. And it's not separate from the divine. It is one with the divine because it gives us a sense of wholeness. So what they wrote is that the discovery that what we were doing, meaning by going and interviewing women and asking them to speak about their experience, the discovery that what we were doing was unique, that it is unusual for people to talk deeply with each other about what informs and gives meaning to their lives, disturbed us. But if it was disheartening to recognize that as a society, we place no importance on sacred sharing in our daily interactions, something else inspired us. The willing spirit with which the women entrusted us with their stories, and the tears which often testified more eloquently than their words to the deep truths they were communicating, told us that we were engaging in a powerfully transformative process. So I give you that first one of sharing and the power of story, the power of telling your story, honoring what you've been through, honoring how it has shaped you, is a very feminine aspect and is important to embrace. Number 2, after these 2 women decided they were going to do this, they said, how the heck do we do this? They said, we don't know, but we're going to go out for 5 days to a cabin somewhere out in California, surrounded by redwoods. We're going to just take 5 days and figure it out. So they get to the cabin, they put down their luggage, they look at each other and they're like, what do we do? They don't know. So they're like, well, let's go sit out by a tree and meditate. So they go sit by a tree. And here's what they write. After a few moments, when we felt peaceful and in harmony with each other and our surroundings, Sherry asked the question that was on both our minds. What is needed now? And out of the silence came an answer with such calm and wisdom that we felt it was a voicing of the deep purpose that had brought us together. Writing the proposal will not be hard work. I spoke the words as I was hearing them, and we were cautioned against forcing ourselves. Very masculine. Push forward, make it happen, right? Try, work. We were cautioned against forcing ourselves. Whenever we started to feel anxious and pressured to produce, we were to stop and go for a walk in the redwoods or along the river. If we were willing to do this, what was needed would come to us. So that balance of efforting and stopping. The third one, entering the garden. They were trying to find a way to write this book that would be sort of a primer, would give people a way to get to the divine feminine. And the way we know to do that, the traditional way, is like, let's have a series of steps. Like, we'll tell them, these are the 5 steps to feminine spirituality, like, which is, again, a very masculine formulation. You can't just have that and not the feminine. So they started thinking about it and living into it and thinking about all the women they'd spoken to. And they realized that what they needed was no more ladders, pyramids, wheels, spheres, or even butterflies or roses. What they needed was something organic and complex as the women themselves. Something that is living. Something, they said, like a garden. And the garden metaphor had a powerful resonance for them. You can enter a garden in 1,000 different ways and at any time. You can enter in childhood from the door of your home, they wrote, and continue to cultivate your garden through the whole of your life, or the door can slam shut in adolescence, leaving you lost and searching for what T.S. Eliot calls the unknown, unremembered gate. You may find your garden at any time in your life, or you may not find it at all. But they knew that if they went for a hierarchy, they would be tempted. Instead of the garden, they would be tempted to see one woman is more advanced than the other. And they said, no more of that. No more of that. We're all in the divine right now. So this is a fascinating and, I think, absolutely hypercritical aspect of the divine that we need to embrace, all of us, at this time. And that's what I had to share with you.
Father, Mother God, we give great thanks for the blessing of coming together every Sunday and sharing our hearts. We are so grateful for our time together, for the words that we share, and for all of our many blessings. Till we see each other next week, may we carry the love and the light and the peace in our hearts and spread it among all who we touch and meet. With much gratitude we say, Amen.
Amen.